Good morning, good life. Totally stole that from Amy Landino, who's one of my favorite YouTubers. How are you all? I hope you are doing spiffingly well. We're going to wait a couple of minutes while we get people on board. I'm also just going to quickly open my blind, which I forgot to do just now. So excuse the very flattering shot you are currently seeing. There we go. Welcome back to A Speech a Week. I'll quickly explain what this is for those of you who are new here as the regulars hop on. My name is Pippa. I'm a professional actress. I trained at Bristol Old Vic Theatre School and I've worked in theatre, film, voiceover and television since graduation, which was a few years ago now. I'm also an acting coach and an entrepreneur. I have an online business in something absolutely unrelated to acting. Although it's had the most absolutely positive effect on my acting, I must say. So what we're here to do today is A Speech a Week. So this is my next chapter on from my A Sonnet a Day project I did, where throughout COVID this year and last year, I actually read a sonnet a day and worked through it with you, discussed it, what I thought it meant. We had little chats and it was really, really fun. And I thought, how can I carry this on? And thus A Speech a Week was born. As an acting coach, I do see a lot of people trying to get into drama schools or just understand Shakespeare and classical language, as well as contemporary plays. I work on both and acting through song. That's another really big thing I'm passionate about. And I realized that a lot of schools are actually shying away from asking you to do a classical speech. And I think it's because they feel like there is a elitist attitude where if you understand Shakespeare, you're posh and you're rich and you're wealthy and you've gone to a private school. And that's not true. I think that Shakespeare was written for the everyman, the every person, and it is a language, the plays, all of it is actually written for the working class. And I kind of want to break the stigma that Shakespeare is hard and that it's difficult and it is only for toffs, because it's not true. So yeah, I decided to do this. Every week I pick a new speech. I reveal it usually on the Monday for my newsletter people. So if you want to get hooked up on my newsletter, I'm going to add it to the description after this. Otherwise, you can go to pippamoss.com and sign up to Pickups with Pippa. And yeah, we just have a little play. This isn't a acting exercise for me. I mean, it kind of is, but it's more of an analytical kind of workshop where we can discuss and interact together for free in a safe space and see what we think about these speeches. Because the great thing about Shakespeare is it's been done lots, but it's also the worst thing about Shakespeare. As a result, and this is the reason I've picked Phoebe, so let's get into Phoebe a little bit. There's a lot of preconceived ideas about how these characters are supposed to be, okay? And with Phoebe, I think she's one of the most misunderstood Shakespeare characters there is, because everyone just says, oh, she's a stupid country girl. And that's kind of the only substance we get given with her. And it's often men telling the woman to play it like this, she's just stupid, so give her a country accent and all this. And that's not really, I think, the way that you should approach Phoebe. I've never played her, but if I did, I would absolutely give her a little bit more sass and intelligence. After all, this speech is about her realizing something and plotting. If she was that stupid, why would she be able to plot something? So maybe, and I'm going to give you this for free because I think it's a really useful thing to think about, but maybe she knows everyone thinks she's stupid because maybe she does dress a certain way, or maybe she does sound a certain way. Unfortunately, there are all sorts of stereotypes kicking around in Britain that enforce certain stigma about people. I'm from Essex and know all about stereotypes. So maybe she knows everyone thinks that and she plays on it. Maybe she's actually a lot more intelligent, but because people know she's from the country and she's just a shepherdess or whatever, and she's just like wearing a miniskirt all the time, maybe she plays on the fact that people don't take her seriously. And I think adding that context to Phoebe will just help you add a little bit more thought into her. If anyone tells you to just be like, oh, don't worry about it too much, it's only Phoebe, or pick that speech because it's easy because she's a dumb character, I really would just distance yourself from that kind of attitude, because I really think it's going to limit you as an actor and make you think you don't have to work as hard in the speech as you do. So what we're going to do is have a little read through of it. Before I do, I'm just going to pop some tablets because you girl isn't feeling very well. Meant to do that earlier, but I was fiddling around with the thumbnail. Introduce yourself. Let me know who's on live. I can see a few of you joining now. So please, I've enabled live chat. Let me know who you are and know that this is really interactive. So if you have any thoughts or feelings, let me know them. If you have alternative ideas, there is no one set way to do this. This is the beautiful thing about acting. So please do share me your thoughts and feelings because I love to hear from you. And if you're not watching live, you can comment below afterwards. 2 ticks. Hate taking tablets. I have to do like a duck waddle or a bird wiggle. Spiffing, let's do it, shall we? I'm going to read it first of all, and then we're going to work through it. As we work through it, I will translate it, and if you have any questions about particular bits, we'll figure it out. As I've said, I've never actually portrayed Phoebe before, so this is a learning thing for me as much as it is for you. Whether you've looked at this before or never even heard about who Phoebe is, we can learn together. So let's do it. Let's give it a read. This is Phoebe from As You Like It. Think not I love him, though I ask for him. 'Tis but a peevish boy, yet he talks well. But what care I for words? Yet words do well when he that speaks them pleases those that hear. 'Tis a pretty youth, not very pretty, but sure he's proud, and yet his pride becomes him. He'll make a proper man. The best thing in him is his complexion, and faster than his tongue did make offence, his eye did heal it up. So, and yet 'tis well. There was a pretty redness in his lip, a little riper and more lusty red than that mixed in his cheek. 'Twas just the difference betwixt the constant red and mingled damask. There be some women, so had they marked him in parcels, as I did, would have gone near to fall in love with him. But for my part, I love him not, nor hate him not, and yet have more cause to hate him than to love him. For what had he to do to chide at me? He said mine eyes were black and my hair black, and now I am remembered, scorned at me. I marvel why. I answered not again. But that's all one. Admittance is no quittance. I'll write to him a very taunting letter, and thou shalt bear it. Wilt thou, Silvius? There we go. Give you a little alien mouth then. There it is. There it is on its feet. So that was not me acting it perfectly, making all the decisions how I would. That's not me giving you an actual self-tape. That's just lifting it off the page so we can get a feel for all of the language in one sitting. Now let's work through it and see what is going on. I'm not going to talk much about the play and Phoebe I'm going to talk about Phoebe as a character, but like what's just happened and everything. But essentially, in a nutshell, Phoebe's just been given a bit of a bit of a bollocking, I want to say, but more of a comeuppance, confrontation from Rosalind, who is dressed as Ganymede. Rosalind is traditionally the heroine of this play. She dresses as a man because she is banished, and she goes into the forest, and she dresses as a man to protect herself, basically. And as a man, she kind of becomes a bit more confident and outspoken and manipulative and clever and has some fun, really. And here she's met Phoebe and Silvius. Silvius is like besotted with Phoebe, and Phoebe just kind of takes him for granted and doesn't really give him the love that Rosalind, dressed as Ganymede, thinks she maybe should. She should kind of, according to Rosalind or Ganymede, Phoebe should kind of like tone it all down a little bit, because actually you're not for all markets, and sell when you can. And if someone's giving you attention, you should take it and run with it, because you're not the bee's knees. And Phoebe's like, what? And Phoebe has not met someone like that that's talked to her like that, I believe. Silvius has kind of always been this like walking around wet blanket who's like going to do anything for her. But here she's actually got a man. And I think this is actually quite important to this speech that we're working on. She's met a man who's kind of telling her that she's not all that and like giving her some sass back. And I think that makes her kind of go, oh, what's going on? Like, I normally just push people around and kind of get my way. So I think the key thing to remember with this speech, I believe, is that she's feeling something for Ganymede, but doesn't really put her finger on that until the end of the speech. And even then, she doesn't quite. I mean, she says she's going to write him a very taunting letter. That's not normally a word you would use. If you're going to write someone a letter who you love, you probably would write a romantic letter or Shakespeare wouldn't have used that word, I'm sure. But I think she's not sure about her feelings for him in their entirety, but she feels something. And I think what's really important to do in this speech is kind of have that sense of figuring it out, like all Shakespeare speeches are pretty much, and marveling why you did not answer again. She says that. She says, I don't know why I didn't bite back. And it's because she loves him. So Ernest has put, hello, Ernest, good morning. He says, hello. Feels like Phoebe had a 3-beer buzz sitting on a bar stool talking to her girls and just dishing the dirt. I like this passage, like overhearing a private conversation but not intruding. Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. A 3-beer buzz. I like that. I've not heard that phrase before, but I'm guessing you're saying she's had 3 beers and she's got the kind of alcohol tingle. But that's it. She is very, and again, be careful when people say things like, oh, here she's thinking on her feet. Like every Shakespeare character is always thinking on their feet. That's why they talk usually. A lot of what they're saying is them figuring out what to do next or plotting what to do next. So, yeah, it's really off the cuff, but every Shakespeare speech is. Let's go through it then. Let's see what's just happened. So Phoebe and Silvius are having a little chinwag. And she asks him, knowest thou the youth that spoke to me erewhile? Enough, but not too much. Yes, Ernest, absolutely. And Silvius is like, no, not really. I've seen him around. And then she's like, think not I love him, though I ask for him. Don't think that I fancy him or I love him, even though I'm asking about him. That's that translation. We'll move along. And actually, there's a semicolon there in my edition. 'Tis but a peevish boy. So she's immediately, not necessarily defensive, unless you want to play it that way particularly, but she's immediately saying he's just a kid. Like, remember, this is a woman dressed as a man, and Rosalind isn't the oldest apple in the cart. She's a young woman. So she probably does look very feminine and a little bit more unusual to some of the men she's maybe met in the country who maybe are a little bit stronger, dirtier, brutish. She's come in and met this lean, thin, short, beautiful man. And yet it's a woman. So 'tis but a peevish boy. And that word peevish is really important. If someone is peevish, they're very youthful. In fact, let's look it up. One thing you will learn about me if you are new here is that the dictionary as an actor should be your best friend. Never just assume you understand a word, even if it's in a modern play and you've used that word your whole life. I remember I used to think that, you get a little rash spot on your lip, a cold sore. I used to think that was a coleslaw. So if I read that in a script, I'd have been like, why are they talking about coleslaws at the kitchen table? It's because they're talking about coleslaw and not a cold sore. So really do, like, accents and variations of words, and sometimes parents just teach you wrong and schools teach you wrong. Use a dictionary. I don't have a hard copy, unfortunately, yet. Use Google. Google is there at a click of a button. So peevish, easily irritated, especially by unimportant things. Interesting, huh? And then there's other examples. Petulant. It reminds me of childish-like behavior. And she says he's a boy as well. She doesn't say he's a man. Yet she does go on to that. But yeah, he's morose, peppery, edgy, impatient, sullen, sulky, churlish, another very common Shakespeare word. Shakespeare word, you know what I mean? Ernest has put, in 102% of rom-coms, the woman first finds the love interest irritable. Phoebe feels that way at the beginning. Yes. So Another thing that Shakespeare does very often is he helps the audience know what's happening before the characters know what's happening. And so I think in this speech, prior to this speech, literally in the same scene, we see Phoebe being a bit taken aback by Rosalind. And if it's a good production of it, I think there will be a really kind of not clear arousal, not like an overtop Phoebe's trying to stroke Ganymede. I think that's a bit too excessive, to be honest. But I think there needs to be some sort of off-guarding and out of balancing of Phoebe around Ganymede. He has to put her in her place at some point, I think, and make her at least kind of be a bit like taken aback. That's the phrase I was looking for. And then Ernest says, but then does she come around? This is it. You'll see it in the rest of the play. Phoebe essentially does get the hots for Rosalind, Ganymede, sorry. But she says she will kind of seek him out and write him that taunting letter, doesn't she, by the end of the speech, which makes me think. And then obviously there's that extra bit. Phoebe, with all my heart, says Sylvia. So we'll get to this at the end. I'll write it straight. The matter's in my head and in my heart. I will be bitter with him and passing short. So it's this idea of kind of being, like you said, the meet cute. In a rom-com, quite often the characters don't really get on. Like in The Proposal, Sandra Bullock and Ryan Reynolds, they don't quite get on. But then they fall in love. They realise it was a defence mechanism or whatever. And Phoebe, what's so funny about that passing line, actually, let's just quickly jump to the end. I'll write it straight. The matter's in my head and in my heart. To me, that makes her feel like I'm going to tell him that I like him. And then she says, I will be bitter with him and passing short, which contradicts what she's just said. If she's going to write it straight, that she loves him, then she would write it, I love you, but she doesn't. So again, that could be on the side of she's really stupid and doesn't really understand herself. But I think there's a lot more excitement to the character if we go, okay, she's very clever. She's going to write it straight. She's telling Sylvia she's going to write it straight, but she doesn't. If all of that makes sense. I think she's a little bit more cunning than we give her credit for in this instance. She's going to try and put him off to put him on. If that makes sense. So, think not I love him, though I ask for him. 'Tis but a peevish boy. Yet he talks well. So there's a constant toing and froing and seesawing in this speech, which is really important for you to hit the nail on the head with in this monologue. Yet he talks well, full stop. But what care I for words? Question. What care I for words? This is quite important as well. If she is such a country girl and, quite promiscuous maybe, and not... personally, I think that is a little bit of a play on the fact that she'd rather get physical than she would have the kind of courting, flirting, talking stage of a relationship. I've totally forgotten what I was about to say then, but I'm sure it'll come back to me. Yeah, he talks well, full stop. Let that moment sit. But what care I for words? Question. That, I think, could be a really interesting insight to the fact that she maybe wants to get physical with him. She's like, I don't care about what he's saying. He's hot, kind of thing. Or at least he's arousing my curiosity, depending on how you want to play it. Yet words do well that he that speaks, when he that speaks them pleases those that hear. So there she's saying, Ernest said, when Willie met Sally. Brilliant. Love that. If anyone here hasn't seen When Harry Met Sally, I only watched it quite late on in life. Oh, and I wish I didn't. Brilliant film. I wish I saw it earlier, is what I'm trying to say. She's constantly kind of contradicting herself, but not quite understanding why she feels and is saying these things. She's immediately dismissive of Ganymede, but then she kind of actually questions herself about that dismissal. 'Tis but a peevish boy. Yeah, he talks well. Although he's a peevish boy, he actually talks more like a grown-up. But what care I for words? But I don't care about the way he's talking. Yet words do well when he that speaks them pleases those that hear. Yet words do well, yet words are good, we could say, when he that speaks them pleases those that hear. But when he uses words that pleases those that are listening, they do well. Like, it's actually quite intriguing. It arouses my curiosity. It pricks up my ears. So she's constantly kind of toing and froing in this speech. So you have to fully commit to the dismissal, and also as an actor, the actual curiosity and why you disrupt your own cut off of Ganymede. And that's what can actually make this speech really, really hard. So you need to texture it neatly and specifically, so it's not just we want to kind of find the truth in this. So, yet words do well when he that speaks them pleases those that hear, and ride the rhythm. He's given you a lovely rhythm here. And then she kind of changes the subject. So she goes on to the looks now. So there are separate gear changes in this speech, and be sure to acknowledge them. She's gone from the fact he's a little kid, but he talks really well, actually. But I've never cared about words. I'd rather care about how someone looks, maybe. Again, think about it. Yet words do well, but actually words are actually really helpful or really nice when they please you. And then she goes on to the look. So she's done that. Next thing, it is a pretty youth. And again, it is. That's just interesting. It is a pretty youth, not very pretty. So it's not just being like, he's really pretty, not very pretty. And this is where I want to go with this as well. She doesn't actually really want to impress Silvius, but she does want to kind of keep him on side, right? So I think quite often people are portraying this in a way where she doesn't want to upset Silvius. But she doesn't care about Silvius. She does upset Silvius. She doesn't seem to care too much about his, actually saying that in the previous speech, she says, she is like, look, leave it. Which, you could play it quite nasty and quite mean girlsy and quite bitchy, but actually she could just be, look, stop it. Like, it could be the height of frustration. I don't know if any of you have been in this situation where someone just won't let it alone, and they're trying to get you on a date or something, and you have to just be like, look, it can get really frustrating. And I've definitely had this before where I've had to be like, look, I'm really not in the headspace to be dealing with this. You're constantly kind of harassing me. Can you please leave it alone? And I think although Phoebe and Silvius are the comic relief and the rom-com couple that don't quite make it, and you feel sorry for Silvius usually, I think there has to be an element of truth and frustration and genuine, not genuine care. It's up to you to decide this, but what I'm trying to say is don't just take it at face value that everyone else has told you she's stupid and hates Silvius and doesn't care about him. I think there is a lot more depth to her. So have a think and do your research and actually read the script with fresh eyes, not the preconceived ideas that hundreds of years of previous actors and directors have had on this character. So Ernest says, When Harry Met Sally is the best chick flick ever. She finds the good and the bad. Impressive that she sees the whole. Exactly. So although she might be dumb on an IQ level, emotionally, I think she is a little bit more curious about what her body is saying and feeling to her. So rather than being this kind of dumb country bumpkin, she could actually be a bit more of a hippie, how does my mind react to my body kind of person? Do you know what I mean? And although society thinks those people are actually kind of stupid and not in the real world, they're probably in the realist world. So I really think about this with her character. I think there's so much more to this speech than people give it credit for. Impressive that she sees the whole, yes, meet cute, but with substance. And morning, Rodney, hello. So she would welcome courting type words, yet she has yet to get those. Exactly. Potentially. Again, these are all ideas I'm just throwing out there for you. But I think she's just impressed with his eloquence and his way of speaking. I don't know if you've read the speech that Rosalind says, and why I pray you, who might be your mother, that you insult, exalt, and all at once over the wretched. It's a fabulous speech where she is kind of like I said earlier, laying it down to Phoebe, being like, look, who do you think you are that you can insult, exalt over the wretched? Like, take advantage, or not take advantage, but be mean to these other people. But although it comes across mean to Ganymede, maybe, again, Phoebe was at the height of her tether with frickin' Silvius, who is literally harassing her, and needed to get him off her back. Again, all food for thought, and depending on the production, that might be right, it might be wrong, but it depends, all depends. So really think about that when you're auditioning for it. I know that Ernest and Rodney aren't going to be auditioning for Phoebe anytime soon, but if you are an actor looking at this, Please dig deeper. It is a pretty youth, not very pretty. So she's saying he is pretty, but not very pretty. Like, again, it's not necessarily this like, he's really pretty, but not very pretty, Sylvius. And I think a lot of people kind of do that kind of thing. I think it's more, you can play that, but also, again, as another offering, it is a pretty youth, but not very pretty. Like, if it's more of a, I can't quite put my finger on it, as opposed to a, I'm just playing up for Sylvius, I think it's a bit more interesting. So pick and choose when you play up to Sylvius, when you dismiss Sylvius, and when you do get lost and in Ganymede, but also your own feelings for him. Like, but he's not that pretty. Like, and pretty is a funny word to use for a male in the modern world. So again, look that up, double check that. It is a pretty youth, not very pretty, but sure, he's proud, and yet his pride becomes him. Notice the lovely pr. There's 4 pras in that, lots of R's and P's. But sure, he's proud, and yet his pride becomes him. I personally see that as a compliment. She's saying he's proud, like he's pride is a good thing, but also is a bad thing, right? If someone's too proud, they are cocky and arrogant and really outspoken. So she says that, but sure, he's proud, yet his pride becomes him. So I think that's a, if something is becoming, it's usually a positive. Yeah, his pride becomes him. It kind of suits him, maybe. He'll make a proper man. So this is interesting as well. She's gone from the talking of him as a boy, a peevish boy, a pretty youth, and now she's saying he'll make a proper man. So already he's giving you a really clear idea into her mindset. She's thinking about what he's going to grow into. So she's thinking with forethought. And I don't know about you, but if someone's really dumb, they're not going to think that far ahead. They're just going to act on impulse and then deal with the consequences afterwards. She is talking about him growing up. What's he going to be like when he grows up? Like, she's asking all these different questions about him in her mind and answering them. He'll make a proper man, full stop. The best thing in him is his complexion. So now she's going on about what the best thing is in him. Ugh, can't get those words out. So she's gone from he's a pretty youth, not very pretty, but sure, he's proud, and yet his pride becomes him. So she's talking about becoming, and then that leads on to the he'll make a proper man. He'll grow into something brilliant. The best thing in him is his complexion. And then she jumps to the best thing in him. So she's gone from like what's not so great about him, and now she's gone on to the best thing. So she is losing herself a little bit, I think, in him, in Ganymede. So really think about that as well, like those thoughts. Iron out the jump from thought to thought. Ernest said, I have read the play before, but after our discussions, I feel like I haven't. And I mean that in the most positive way. I'm glad. And this is it. Like I think because I wasn't late to acting, but when I read Shakespeare, I never think, I always question what people tell me about a character. And because I've worked with a lot of older actors, especially, I've worked with a lot of older actors, and I've watched a lot of these speeches be performed and get feedback. I know that often there is just this generalization from people that are an older generation in the acting world who are usually mentoring the younger generation, where they say things like, oh, she's just the comic relief and she's the dumb character. Let's make her really Essex girl. And that's what I really get peeved about, is this stereotype that is within Shakespeare's new society. I like people actually taking the script and doing something new with it and not listening to the preconceived ideas of what the characters should be. And yeah, they should be fun and everything, but at the end of the day, we've got to have truth in it. And I think so many people try and make Shakespeare relevant and contemporary. They do just make it really slapstick, or like, and those productions can be amazing, but they make certain characters the comedy roles, and you can't ever differentiate them quite like that. I think Iago is hilarious, for example. I think Desdemona is laughable because of the way she's so naive, but she's a very serious character. So it's about kind of questioning questioning when people say and generalize about these characters. Do it for yourself. Like, think about it for yourself. Don't just take on what everyone else has said about it. I see people talking about Shakespeare characters and things on YouTube or in books, and I'm like, that's just your idea, but they're saying it like it's fact. And I've never been the person, even as a kid, I've always been the person to be like, but you're telling me it's like that, but why? I'm always like, but why? So there you have it. Always ask why though. Find the evidence in the text. And just because that director who's 80 years old tells you that that's how she is, doesn't mean that's how she is. So think about it for yourself. Rant over. Rodney says, maybe she's wondering if this is material she could work with or even mold. Exactly. He'll make a proper man. She sees him as a work in progress. And can she be the woman that can affect this growth? She goes from esoteric to substance. Exactly. Rodney, exactly. We're typing the same thing. And this is what I mean. Like, there's more to her. There is more substance to her. And in that speech where Rosalind overhears, I don't think she's being a total biatch, but I think women, I'd love to have seen how someone would have portrayed this in Shakespeare's day, because I don't think it would have been quite as, jokey, bitchy. I think women were constantly, and still are, constantly sexually harassed. And I think that's what Silvius is kind of doing. So depending on what he's doing and her reaction, it's going to have a totally different outcome of her character. And I think if we do play her as a smarter person, she could be seeing this as more of a long-term thing. I've not met anyone like this before. He's really interesting. And again, if she was that dumb and that physical only, she would just be like, oh, he's hot. Let me write him a letter, Silvius. Let's go. She's not. She's got this lovely monologue at the end of the scene. We could, if it was just funny stuff, Shakespeare would have left it at Phoebe getting a bollocking from Ganymede and being all like, oh, I like him, go. But he doesn't. He gives us a lot more depth to her. And I love that, the idea that maybe she is thinking, how can she mold this? And that's what I'm saying. I feel like there's more to her where she's like, how can I make this work to my advantage? People think I'm this dumb, blonde country girl, but maybe how can I actually make this work in my favor? Which is what most women would have had to have done in the day that Shakespeare wrote this play. So there you go. Loads to think about. Ernest says, if we were doing this, I would have a counter conversation of him talking to his bro about her, relating the same type of thing. As in Ganymede or Silvius? She is pretty, but not too pretty. I see what you mean. Do you mean Ganymede or Silvius, though? Or both? Or just from a general male perspective? Interesting. Moving on with the text then and the translation. These often do become rather good in-depth conversations, which I love. But let's get a move on. The best thing in him is his complexion. So his complexion. And faster, and then another thing. So she's like, the best thing in him is his complexion. And actually there's another thing. So then she goes back to his speaking, but the way she talks about it is different. She says, and faster than his tongue did make offense, his eye did heal it up. So now she's getting more specific. It's not just these generalizations of he talks well and he's pretty. She's getting a lot more streamlined and focused on what specifically makes him good. It's his complexion. It's his skin tone. And faster than his tongue did make offense. So again, I'm picturing the tongue literally wagging around the teeth, making the shape. This is, again, unwritten direction for how you should, if you're playing Phoebe, be reacting to Ganymede in the previous, it's not the previous scene, it's the same scene, but in the previous scene together. And faster than his tongue did make offense, so his tongue did offend her, his eye did heal it up. But when I looked at his eyes, I forgave him. That's what she's saying. So that's really specific. And again, if she was that dumb, she would just be like, he's really pretty, but not very pretty, but he's really nice. Like, surely it would be more general, and it's not. Shakespeare doesn't do characters by halves. And I think with Phoebe, we often put her in half, and we shouldn't. Give her more credit. This is my little, having a little rampage about how we don't give Phoebe enough credit, but never mind. I think it's important to have this conversation. And you can see all of this, what I like to call back work, in auditions, when people have done this much prep and that much depth on a character that is generally a comedy, whatever, boring, dumb character. You can see it. This is all golden. If you're auditioning for drama school, this is all very golden. Shakespeare wants us to think of her as a lightweight. I think he wants us to think of her as, I'm not sure it's a lightweight. Explain what you mean by lightweight. Like, I'm thinking alcohol, like someone who can't take their liquor. But explain what you mean a little bit more. He is setting us up not to, yes, right, okay. He's setting us up not to expect the later depth of her character. Definitely. And I think I think what's really important about their relationship, Sylvius, Phoebe, and Ganymede, the director needs to have a really clear vision for that. It's like in The Merchant of Venice, oh God, I've totally forgotten all their characters' names. Absolute mind blank. The director has to have a clear vision about that dynamic. And if they don't, I think it becomes very, Ganymede hates Phoebe, Phoebe loves Ganymede, and Sylvius is like the poor innocent, oh, love me. But actually there is a lot more depth to that. And I think we need to remember the context it was written in. There was a lot of this harassment of women, constantly trying to get them to do something that we want, and women had to play the game. And I think Phoebe is the ultimate game player here. Rosalind is too, but she's dressed as a man, but Phoebe stays in her female form and plays the game. So yeah, I like what you're saying there, Ernest, in short. Faster than his tongue did make offence, his eye did heal it up. Full stop. Really acknowledge the full stops here as well. There's so many colons in this, and commas and dashes in this speech, breaking up each line. But when we get a full stop, really acknowledge the full stop. Why does she actually stop and take a breath? Why does the thought end there? And what's the next thought? That has to be specific. Otherwise, this speech just becomes a rocking boat of, "'Tis a pretty youth, not very pretty, but sure he's proud, and yet his pride becomes him. He'll make a proper man." The best thing, and it just becomes really generalized and it's boring to watch. He is not very tall. Oh, where are we going? His eye did heal it up. So then she's thinking about his eyes, and then surely going on to the height, if his eyes were like level with hers, that would mean one thing. If they were up here or down there, again, think about why she goes from eyes to height. So is she thinking about embracing him? Is she thinking about where she was looking into his eyes? Is she actually picturing his eyes and thinking, oh, but actually he's not very tall. I like my men to normally be a bit taller. All of that needs to go through her brain before she starts talking next. And you need to decide why she says the next thing. He is not, and again, he is not very tall, yet for his years he's tall. His leg is but so-so, and yet 'tis well. And that's it on the height and the leg thing. And I think the leg is effectively like the height, and also his walking. Remember, legs and gait were often used and gait as in G-A-I-T, like were used in connection. If someone was limping or whatever, or they had like an illness or something. Remember, in these days, it was very judgmental on that sort of thing. You were poor, you couldn't afford to eat, you were malnourished, you were ill, you were sick. Ugh, get away from me. It was very much life and death, a bit like COVID. But she's saying he's not that tall, but he is quite tall for his age. And actually, his leg is average, but yeah, it's really nice. So again, it's this kind of confusion and curiosity about him. And she's finding the positive out of the negative that she initially brings up. And I really want to kind of express this too, because it's really important in that section I've just done. He is not very tall. He is not very tall, yet for his years, he's tall. So it's 12 syllables there. His leg is but so, and yet 'tis well. And then we go back to 10. He is not very tall, yet for his years he's tall. His leg is but so, and yet 'tis well. So the first line is off. Although it's got an even amount of syllables, it's still not an iambic pentameter line, really. The next one is. So she's discombobulated, but in rhythm. So use the rhythm there and make sure you're using the stress right. If I said, he's really handsome, or like he's not very, he doesn't have a good beard, but for his age, he has a good beard. The stress needs to be really, the stress is really important here. And a lot of people miss it. A lot of the time I've seen people go, he's not very tall, yet for his years, he's tall. That's not where you'd stress it. Like, really think about it. He's not very tall, yet for his years he's tall, but for his age he is tall. So make sure you really hit that stress properly. He is not very tall, yet for his years he's tall. So even the rhythm tells you it's years he's tall. So it breaks up a little bit. His leg is but so, and yet 'tis well. It's a lovely rhythm, and it's a lovely bounce away from the iambic and back onto the pentameter and back onto the pentameter. So use it. Goodness me, use it. That's a bugbear of mine, those two lines. They're often misstressed. And you can do what you want, but I think it's really clear and obvious to use it like that in that that bit. Moving along so we can get through this. Rodney says, the phrase leaves well as the pause, yes, that refreshes on the overall phrase. Well is the conclusion, maybe. She is taking herself into him as still an option. Exactly. So if he adds those extra 2 syllables, let's say he did that for 8 lines, when we got to the 10-syllabled line, we would be like, there would be a natural expectation of us to expect 2 more words or syllables, but we don't get them. So it helps us understand that there should be a little pause there. He is not very tall, yet for his years he's tall. His leg is but so, and yet 'tis well. Like, do you see that? Do you feel that and hear that? Love it. There was a pretty redness in his lip, and now we're getting even more specific. She is deep diving into his face and picking it apart. So again, she's really concentrating, and her focus is really straight here. Again, usually she's played as a bit of an airhead, next shiny thing, but she is not with him. So maybe, she's really going into depth here about Ganymede. A little riper, and I've heard this before, actually. I'm going to talk about this. She is talking herself into him as still an option. Absolutely. And even if that's unintentional, I don't think she's trying to talk herself into it, but she is just questioning herself, and therefore maybe she still doesn't quite get it, because often we are in love with someone and we don't realize, like we've said before, often meet cutes are, you kind of are catty and bitching. I've definitely had that in the past where, you kind of don't really get on with someone, but there's something there or whatever, a bit like When Harry Met Sally, all of that sort of thing. But it's this, she either doesn't quite compute that still, or she does compute it, but she's playing a game and going to have a bit of fun with it. Or maybe not even a bit of fun with it, but she's going to go about it the way she knows to go about it or wants to go about it. There's always, she does what she does for a reason. So this is something that I heard someone say once before, like, she's trying to be poetic here, but it doesn't really work. But I'm not sure I agree with that. A little riper and more lusty red than that mixed in his cheek. 'Twas just the difference betwixt the constant red and the mingled damask. I think she succeeds in sounding poetic there. What do you think? I've heard a male director say before, like, she's just trying to sound sophisticated there. Where's the depth in that? Where's the fun in that? Where's the give the character credit? I think she pulls it off there. She hasn't thus far. Everything's been really choppy and changey. He is a pretty youth, not very pretty, but sure, he's proud. Yeah, his pride becomes him. He'll make a proper man. She doesn't do any long lines. She doesn't do any long sentences. And even in the previous speech, actually, just have a quick little look. There's a lot of commas and things like breaking it up. It's still beautiful language because it's Shakespeare, but this is a moment where she does, maybe, if she is more intelligent than she makes out to other people, does allow herself to become the poet that she is. And also, if she's a country bumpkin, she probably wouldn't be very well read and all this sort of stuff. But yet here she comes out with this eloquent, interesting, difficult line. And because it's tricky to say, a little riper and more lusty red than that mixed in his cheek. 'Twas just like, it's not an easy line to say. So it forces the actor to slow down. Another unwritten direction from Shakespeare there, saying, slow down here. I think she really kind of gets something. Then find the reason as the actor. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but find the reason why that bit is slowing down and why that is more poetic. I personally think it is more poetic than anything she's said thus far. She catches details, retain them. Definitely not stupid, says Rodney. Right? So fed up with seeing her being like this, dumb West Country kind of like, oh God, I wouldn't have done that, Sylvia. It's like boring. So anyway, but then if that's right for the production, everything carry on. But there's more to it than that, I believe. Let's read that line again. There was a pretty redness in his lip, a little riper and more lusty red than that mixed in his cheek. 'Twas just the difference betwixt the constant red and mingled damask. Full stop. And then she comes back to Silvius. There be some women, Silvius, had they marked him in parcels as I did, would have gone near to fall in love with him. But not for my part. There's a different drive after that bit. And I don't know whether, maybe, I think she has fallen in love with him, but she knows to make sure Silvius knows that she hasn't fallen in love with him. Because if Silvius knows, and it's not that she'll lose him as a companion, he knows she doesn't love him. She's already gone through the whole, like, I would not be thy executioner speech, where she's saying, like, go away. She doesn't care about that, right? Surely she cares about not letting the facade that she hates Ganymede fall down. She'd rather everyone thinks that she hates Ganymede than everyone knows that she loves Ganymede. Why is that? Because she's smart, protecting herself, maybe. She's used to men just throwing themselves at her. Maybe she knows that if Silvius knows that, he'll tell everyone, and that will ruin the game she's about to embark on. Does all of that make sense? I think it does. And exactly what Rodney's saying, she gets the details and she retains them. She's just gone into the real depth there. His lip was pretty, there was a pretty redness in his lip. It was more ripe and more lusty. So now again, language, lusty red, lust. She doesn't talk about fire, but these are kind of passionate colors and words that she's using, right, as well. So maybe she is getting a bit more sexually turned on about this. I don't know. Again, this is all to play with. But she does get specific that mixed in his cheek. It was just like she gets really tight on this. It was just the difference between or betwixt the constant red and mingled damask. Let's look up damask, actually, because that's a word used quite often. Damask. And constant red, I think that's a lovely way to describe it. A figured woven fabric with a pattern visible on both sides, typically used for table linen and upholstery. And it's also short for the damask rose. Remember, this is all being said in the forest, and there would be, all sorts of wildlife around. And I think a lot of the country folk or whatnot use a lot of nature as imagery, and Shakespeare does this quite often, especially in the sonnets. He does talk about flowers and smells and the senses that come from nature in his poetry. but she's talking unmingled damask, like the mingled, it's mixed up. She's talking about the specific difference between the complexion in his cheek and his lip and everything. Like, she becomes a poet in that moment, I think. And I love it. I love it. And then she gets her head on again. Not that she didn't have it on before, but she steps into the plotting bit. So this is a gear shift now. She didn't say Sylvius. She says there'll be some women, Sylvius, who would have, why does she say Sylvius and bring it back to him? Why does she use his name there? Think about this. And Rodney says she is about to ask a favor from Sylvius. Exactly. So she's gone from dreaming about Ganymede to how can I think, personally, I think she knows what she's doing here. And I think she's playing up to it. Which not contradicts what I said about the final 4 lines where she says, I'll write it straight, the matter's in my head and in my heart. I will be bitter with him and passing short. Remember, when people did speeches, they often were really confessing. I think there could be a really useful tool here. She's dreaming about Ganymede. She's talking to Sylvius, but remember, she's also talking to us, the audience. So I think, again, if you're playing her quite clever, we could use the audience really, really, really well in Phoebe. This is making me want to play Phoebe so bad. Ernest says, think both sides is important. Phoebe seems to see both sides of every attribute. Yeah, and I think this is a coming of age play as well. So I think maybe that's the way she used to think about people, purely from a physical and looks perspective, but now she is she's triggered by Ganymede. There's something that's making her mature in her evaluations of someone. Damask is considered a beautiful cloth. Palace furniture is often covered in damask. Yes, Ernest, says Rodney. Yeah, and that's really interesting as well. When I looked up damask, as I just read out, it's often double-sided. So she does say as well, so it could be the flower, because obviously they're in the forest, and I'd naturally think it would be more of the flower, but mingled damask, betwixt the constant red and mingled damask. A lot of the people living in the forest are either kicked out of the country, what's the word exiled. And as we know, people like Celia, Rosalind, her dad, they were banished, but they were actually kind of like aristocracy, right? Like, they were posh people, they were wealthy, they were part of the elite community there that were shaping the society that they were living in, but they were banished. So there's going to be little, and this, again, if it's a good production, there's probably going to be little hints of the wealth and the life they had before the forest being blended in, like their clothes might be a bit more ragged, but actually it's a full court. For example, Touchstone might be in a full court jester outfit that's beautiful, but it starts to get, throughout the play, it becomes more naturified, it becomes more flowered and ripped or torn or adapted to suit his development in the play. It's such a fun production to really get your teeth into as an actor, as a creative, as a director, as a designer, all of that. And mingled damask. There'll be some women, Sylvius, had they marked him in parcels as I did, there'll be some women, Sylvius, had they compartmentalized him like I did, would have gone near to fall in love with him, would have fallen in love with him. But for my part, I love him not, nor hate him not. And yet have more cause to hate him than to love him. So again, this is really, really interesting. So she says, she again, a stupid person wouldn't have this forethought to step back and talk about other people's feelings and emotions and how they might cope with it. I think she's emotionally like sharp as a button. That's not the word. Sharp as a knife. There be some women, Sylvius, had they marked him in parcels as I did, would have gone near to fall in love with him. But for my part, I love him not, nor hate him not, and yet have more cause to hate him than to love him. So here I think she's putting on a show for Sylvius. She's saying, look, I don't love him, but I also just don't hate him. But I should have more reason to hate him, actually. Again, this isn't necessarily the right way to do it. This is an offering that I would do without knowing the context of the play and the other actors' choices. But, what she could be saying here, This could all be scripted in her brain. He was really mean to me, actually. Wasn't he, Silvius? Oh my God, what an absolute arse. I do hate him. I'm going to write him a really evil letter to get Silvius on her side. She needs Silvius to do what she wants him to do to get her game played and manipulate Ganymede in the way she wants him to. Does the letter actually slag him off, or does it actually have some sort of code in it, a cryptic message that is saying, I love you, meet me by the waterfall at the moonfall, or whatever? Like, we don't know. Maybe Yusuf Damask is a way Phoebe subconsciously recognizes some elevated class in Rosalind. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it as well. Again, there's so many different interpretations to this, right? Lovely work, everyone. Moving on, there be some women, Sylvia, so I've gone through that bit, but for my part, I love him not, nor hate him not, and yet have more cause to hate him than to love him. So that's it. There's the moment where she's, I think, trying to get Silvius back on her side, because he might be getting a bit suspicious here. Again, up to that actor to decide how he's interpreting it, and the director to guide you down the right track here. I have more cause to hate him than to love him. For what had he to do to chide at me? For he was chiding at me, and there's a question there. So again, she's getting Silvius a lot more engaged. She's asking him a question, just like she did at the beginning. And chide, if someone chides at you, it's chide, whip, like quip at you. They dig at you, to have a go at me. He said mine eyes were black and my hair black. In the modern world, we know that black is beautiful. However, back then, not talking racially, but the color black was usually associated with darkness and ugliness and baseness, but light resembled God and the Lord and the sunshine, and nightfall was more dangerous and unknown. Light was more powerful and good and, yeah, see-through. You could see what was going on. So yeah, he said mine eyes were black and my hair black, so that he slagged me off. And now I am remembered, scorned at me, and now I am remembered, scorned at me. Just checking that. Scorned at me, full stop. And this is the bit where I think we lose it most of the time, from my experience of seeing this play quite a few times and seeing actors give it a whirl. He said I was black. He said my eyes were black, my hair was black, and now I remembered. Now I'm looking back, he really scorned at me. He hated on me. He was really mean to me. I marvel why I answered not again. That line says a lot about her state of mind, I think. I marvel. That word, marvel. If something, first of all, again, Marvel comic books didn't exist back in those days. So now I often think of, Marvel and all of the Captain America franchise and everything. But here it says, be filled with wonder or astonishment. A wonderful or astonishing person or thing. It's a sensation. It's a miracle. It's a phenomenon. It's a paragon. It's a wizard. It's something else. I marvel why I answered not again. Why didn't I wonder why I didn't talk back. So is she marveling genuinely, like, I wonder why I didn't answer him? If she is, I think that makes her more stupid. I marvel. If she's actually like, I'm amazed I didn't answer back again. Do you see the two different things I'm saying there? So it could be, I marvel why I answered not again. Or, I marvel why I answered not again. I can't believe he managed to shut me up. That's so much more interesting. It's like, wow, I can't believe he got the better of me. But that's all one. Admittance is no quittance, right? This bit. So what have we got here? Why am I not acting like I normally do? Exactly. And that's where the meet cute in a rom-com becomes the whole like, oh, I think there's something there. He has impacted me. She has impacted me. She's made me see something differently. End of the holiday, when Cameron Diaz starts to cry. Oh, we now know that Graham has actually made her character feel more. It's actually made her grow as a person. And I think that is a really important part. And it's a lovely, lovely moment that is often so underplayed when we do this speech. I think she is pleased she had such self-restraint. Lovely, Rodney. Yeah. And that works, and and I think the word marvel, it means astonishment. It means wonder. So there has to be a sense of, wow, right? Don't you think? Like, that's the word that's being used. Use it. Earnest. Well, I now have a greater appreciation for Phoebe, but I still like Rachel and Monica better. Brilliant. Lovely contemporary reference there. I love it. So yes, admittance is no quittance. So, but that's all one. Admittance is no quittance. So this is a really interesting line. So admittance says something that has been omitted or neglected. The act of omitting or the state of having been omitted. So let me just look that up in a little bit more depth because it hasn't come up with the version I like to read from. Oh, it was used a lot in the 1700s. It hasn't been used really in the 1800s much at all. Interesting. So admittance is essentially like being cut out, isn't it? Right? Like, what did it say again? Oh, my internet's lagging. Can you still hear me? Something has been omitted or neglected. So she's saying here, admittance is no quittance is great. It's lovely, isn't it? So well done. So what she's saying here, I think, is being cut out is no quittance. Like, it's no reason to stop, if that makes sense. Quittance, looking that up as well. I love the phonetics. I love seeing the phonetics of these words. It makes me so happy. A release or discharge from a debt or obligation, a document certifying this, a receipt. So being cut out is not no proof, I would say, but it is no, let's say, receipt. It doesn't mean anything. It's not for me to stop doing what I'm doing. That's how I kind of see that. Admittance is no quittance. Being cut out doesn't mean isn't receipt of what's actually happening here. And again, that's a really sophisticated 2 words that she has just used. No one says those words. What? She's not stupid. So admittance is no quittance. And this makes me think she knows a lot more what she's doing. She's saying, just because that has happened, it doesn't mean that's the case. So again, like I said, in the final 4 lines where she does end the scene, I'll write it straight. The matter's in my head and in my heart. I will be bitter with him and passing short. She knows what she's doing. She's saying, just because I display that I hate him, it doesn't mean that I do. And that is a main theme throughout this play. Rosalind is scorning at Orlando throughout the whole play. She's tricking him. She's acting like Rosalind and being like, I will be proud and I will laugh at you, then scorn at you, and all of that sort of thing. You know, that bit where they just establish their plot to get Orlando out of love with this Rosalind that Ganymede knows nothing about, but she does. She's toying with him. It's this idea of like, of mercurial love and passions flailing out in all directions. Don't confuse me not saying anything with me not having anything to say. Yes, love that. Yes, a great phrase. Phoebe is not a minor. It is not minor. Wisdom emits from her. So I think it's really important to remember, if you do want to think she is stupid, fine, but there's not just one level of stupid, right? My partner always says stupid street exists. Like, people sometimes walk down stupid street, and then we all do stupid things from time to time. But I know for me, I'm an actor. Like, my emotional intelligence is quite up there. I can empathize really well. I sympathize. I really process that sort of thing really well. But when it comes to maths and science and history, like, I get jumbled up with that a lot of the time. Numbers I struggle with. Dates I can really get tricky with. But if it's an emotional thing or an artistic thing or a colors thing or a picture thing, an imagination thing, I get a better grip on that. So that's just me as a person. So, you know, although I didn't hit the best grades in my science A level, when it came to my film studies, like that was a degree standard thing, because that's just the way my brain works and articulates better. So really, really interesting. So, you know, the science department could have thought I was really stupid, but the art department thought I was amazing because I got these things differently. So, you know, think of it like that. Is she maybe intellectually not all there? Although I think there's some things with that poetic language and the omittances, no quittance. Or is she just a different kind of brain worker? Makes me really want to like explore ADHD a lot more as well, because they talk a lot about how that's a different spectrum and how technically we're all kind of on a spectrum of that. And personally, I absolutely think I am. I mean, I don't know, and I, you know, I'm not generalizing any of this. I don't know enough about it to make a comment on it, but there is so much more depth to everyone's thought process than we give credit for as humans, but especially in our Shakespeare characters. So yeah, I hope all of that really helps you just give her more depth, because she deserves it. But that's all one. Omittance is no quittance. I'll write to him a very taunting letter. She tells Silvius it'll be a taunting letter, but in her mind, it could be a romantic letter. It could be a cryptic letter. Who knows? I'll write to him a very taunting letter, and thou shalt bear it, wilt thou, Silvius? Phoebe, with all my heart, he says. He'll do it. I'll do anything for you. I'll write it straight. The matter's in my head and in my heart. So, you know, earlier I said about the whole audience thing. Often people do the speech picturing Ganymede and then picturing Silvius. I was doing it the other way around. Ganymede and Silvius. But the audience are there as well. And I think they're always there. And one lovely clip, actually, I would really recommend from this play, Pippa Nixon's Rosalind, was... There's a lovely scene with her in Orlando, the scene I mentioned earlier about the whole... mercurial, yes, I cured one who suffered with love, or whatever the words are. It's on the RSC website. I highly recommend, and their YouTube. I highly recommend you look it up. But there's a lovely moment where they actually use the camera, where she's actually kind of plotting and like, oh guys, I'm doing something now that is a little bit cheeky. So for example, we could have here, she's talking to Silvius, I'll write it straight. The matter's in my head, to the audience, and in my heart. I will be bitter with him, and in passing short. Wink to the audience. Go with me, Silvius. Silvius leaves. I look at the audience, and I'm like, I'm in love, and then go. Do you see how like that could make it, that could transform the whole thing? And that's not in the script, but it is in the script. Does that make sense, what I just said? Did that read? Phoebe is not. The letter is going to be coquettish, potentially, or at least it should be. It will probably, yeah. There could be all sorts in there. Or it could be really mean. It could just fully be totally mean. And maybe Ganymede doesn't see it. You know, like you just hope and assume that the person you're best friends with understands what you're saying. But anything can be misconstrued, right? Sarah, welcome. Have you been on the whole time, dear? Sarah's one of my students. But this is like getting me so fired up for Phoebe. And like, she's misunderstood. Like Pink, like Pink's album. So, did that bit read, by the way? Do tell me, like if it didn't read, where I was like, oh, I'll look at the audience and my heart, blah, 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 blah. All of that could be played with, and I think it should be played with. And I think she isn't just talking to Silvius. I think the audience is there, and this is a lovely opportunity where she is being vulnerable. Therefore, I think she should be using the audience. However, in an audition situation, it can be quite hard to get that across, so I understand people don't do that. But I've never seen a production where she really does use the audience. And I'm sure there are some, but I've just not seen it. If you do know of one, please send it to me, because I want to know. I want to know if the audience are used. Right, let's do it again. I'm going to read it another time. I'm going to learn this speech. I'm going to add it to my repertoire. I don't know why I never did before. What a fool. Any thoughts or feelings as I read it this time? I'll try and do it a little bit different. Using the more she's a smart chick approach. But I think that does take a lot more work than the hour we've just done on it. So let's have a go, but we'll see how we go. I'm balancing you on a box of tissues and my complete works is really, really heavy. So let's try again. I'm going to use you as the audience and I'm going to talk to Silvius over here and I'm going to talk to about Ganymede. Ganymede, I'm going to put in my mind's eye there. That's where he was standing by that tree. Yeah. And I'm going to use you as the audience. Might work in places, might not, but this is an experiment. Let's have fun and see what happens. Think not I love him, though I ask for him. 'Tis but a peevish boy. Yet he talks well. But what care I for words? Yet words do well. I'm going to start again. Think not I love him, though I ask for him. 'Tis but a peevish boy. Yet he talks well. But what care I for words? Yet words do well when he that speaks them pleases those that hear. 'Tis a pretty youth. Not very pretty, but sure he's proud, and yet his pride becomes him. He'll make a proper man. The best thing in him is his complexion. And faster than his tongue did make offence, his eye did heal it up. He's not very tall, yet for his years he's tall. His leg is but so-so, yet 'tis well. There was a pretty redness in his lip. There was a pretty redness in his lip, a little riper and more lusty red than that mixed in his cheek. 'Twas just the difference betwixt the constant red and a mingled damask. There be some women, Silvius, would have gone, bloody hell. Let's start again. Damn it, I was feeling that, and that's why I got jumbled. Let's start again. Not from the beginning, but from there. Betwixt the constant red and a mingled damask. There be some women, Silvius. There be some women, Silvius. Had they marked him in parcels, as I did, would have gone near to fall in love with him. But for my part, I love him not, nor hate him not. And yet, I have more cause to hate him than to love him. For what had he to do to chide at me? He said, mine eyes were black, and my hair black, and now I am remembered, scorned at me. I marvel why I answered not again. But that's all one. Admittance is no quittance. I'll write to him a very taunting letter, and thou shalt bear it. Wilt thou, Silvius? I'll write it straight. The matter's in my head and in my heart. I will be bitter with him and passing short. Go with me, Silvius. Hilarious. Got a total lump in my throat then. But look, I think she's got so much more to her. And I think I was trying to be like playing up to Silvius when I was doing the whole I have more cause to hate him than to love him, don't I, Silvius? He told me that I was ugly, and you know I'm not ugly, don't you, Silvius? Like, I think thinking of it like that is really, really helpful. As a result, I was getting into that. I don't think I did the I marvel why I answered not again thing very well. But I think that could be to Silvius as well, kind of being, I don't know why I didn't answer back. But to the audience, maybe I do know I answered back, or at least looking at Ganymede, or having some sort of acknowledgement to Ganymede and the fact that I'm wondrously amazed by this person. And I've actually just realized that is a helpful thing to have a nod to, perhaps. And I rushed but that's all one. Admittance is no quittance. yeah, I would have slowed that down a bit more as well. There is a full stop after quittance in my edition anyway, which is quite important. So, hope you enjoyed that. I really did. An hour and 15 of your time talking all about Phoebe. If you are new here and found that beneficial, please do let me know what in particular has made you go, ah. Give me a thumbs up. Comment below if you've got any extra thoughts or feelings about this. And don't forget to sign up to my newsletter if you haven't done so already. I release it usually on a Monday. This week's a bit late because I messed up last week, but hey, we're all only human. And I also tell you what we are going to be doing on a speech a week a few days before as well. So make sure you're subscribed to this channel. You can see it on my community page, but you can also get it in my newsletter. I send you a separate one about a speech a week. Oh dear, you are the best. Well, maybe not the best, but you made the shortlist. Thank you. Lordy, lordy, lordy. I hope you enjoyed that. Really good to see you all. Thank you for joining in on the whole ride. I'm going to go do some training now, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.